So in this 2016 NBA draft class, there are two guys that most of the media, most of the fans classify as a cut above the rest. The first one I've already talked about in Ben Simmons. And the other one is the small forward from Duke, Brandon Ingram. And I said my piece already about Ben Simmons. And I think sometimes it's important to remember that it can be really hard to evaluate some of these guys, in part because most of these guys coming into the draft are 18 to 20 years of age, with maybe 1 year at most, no more than two usually, years of college basketball in their back pocket. So a lot of these guys that come in are incredibly raw. You see the upside, you see the potential. But as much as anything else now, I think the NBA draft could be a crapshoot more than ever because with the combination of international players and all these 18 and 19-year-old kids, I mean, think about if you were handed the keys to an NBA franchise back when you were 18, 19 years of age. How well do you think that experience would have gone? I know how poorly that experience would have gone if it was me. I'm just saying. So let's talk about Brandon Ingram. 6'9", 195-pound small forward, the freshman from Duke, who I thought had a pretty solid 2015-2016 season. There are periods of time where I wish he wouldn't have went to Duke. This is where sometimes I think these guys make a mistake going to Duke, in my opinion, because of the fact of the type of system that Coach K utilizes on offense and defense isn't always made to help the individual stand out, which is fine. That's not his job. Coach K's job is to win college basketball games and speak in really annoying voice tone like this, because I'm Mike Krzyzewski. And he does a splendid job of that and winning national championships in very down years for college basketball. That's been his recent trend, anyways. So there is a part of me that wishes Brandon Ingram would have went somewhere else where his skills could have been better utilized on a more consistent basis. We could have seen more of the real type of potential player that he could be at the NBA level. But you look at him, you hear a lot of people call him baby Kevin Durant and compare him to Kevin Durant. And I'll get to my thoughts on the comparison here in just a moment or two. But I could see some of what people are enamored with and what they could see in terms of how he might project to be a Kevin Durant type of player at the NBA level. A guy at 6'9", really wiry, thin, but really, really long as well. I believe he has an over 7-foot wingspan. So this is a guy with long arms that could be really hard potentially to block his shot, a guy that could have some versatility to be a dangerous post player at the NBA level in large part because of that length. You look at a guy as well and his ability to space the floor as a perimeter shooter, a really good perimeter shooter. Not a great perimeter shooter yet. Should develop into one, but a good solid perimeter shooting touch. That's going to be his way to be able to make an impact in the NBA immediately is via his ability to knock down the three-point shot. I think he's got an adequate ability to create his shot off the dribble in the sense of getting to the basket. Now, I have some concerns. I'll talk about that in a moment in terms of if that will really translate to the NBA level against NBA level talent and NBA level athletes and NBA level length. But for right now, at the college level, you could see his ability to get by people on the dribble in part because of his length. You know, this is a guy that can cover a lot of space in a hurry, and that could be very, very appealing when you're trying to structure an offense around a guy. He can do a lot of different things. I think he does a good job of playing within the system. I will give Brandon Ingram a lot of credit for this at Duke this past year. I thought he did a wonderful job of playing within the system in a lot of cases. I thought he played with a good level of unselfishness when, frankly, he could have been more selfish than he actually was. I liked his abilities as a passer. I thought he had decent floor vision. I thought he did a good job of understanding when he could kick the ball out, when he could help rotate the ball. I think he's solid in terms of moving off of the basketball as well, which is going to be critical for him as right now what he is primarily, his strength is as a stop and pop, pick and pop type of rollout, move off of screens type of perimeter spot up shooter. His ability to move off the ball with that length, he's going to be guarded by threes and fours. Some threes and fours at the NBA level could really have trouble sticking with them in terms of going around screens and following them all over the place. And from a defensive standpoint, he's got some really good defensive upside, in particular as a shot blocker. I thought he showed a good knack for blocking shots. I thought he showed a good instinct or an awareness for coming over and helping on the weak side. I think as we talk about his ability to hit the outside game, we talk about his length and talk about this and that. Similar to Kevin Durant when he was at Texas as a freshman, I thought people slept a little bit on the defensive upside at that time, his ability to rebound, and in particular his ability to be an effective shot blocker. I don't think Durant, in terms of a prospect going back to that 2007 draft, was getting enough attention for how much potential he had in that area, especially playing at the three position. Same thing for Brandon Ingram here. Now, there are questions for me with Brandon Ingram. It all starts with his strength. At 195 pounds, he's definitely got to get bigger and stronger at the NBA level. He doesn't necessarily have to get up to 240, 245 pounds, but the dog, you got to get up to at least 210, 215. Let's put it this way. I'm not in the greatest shape as that I once was. I could get there again, I guess, if I wanted to, but I'm about 5'10" and a half or so. And I weigh about 190 pounds, 195 on a bad day. This kid is a foot taller than me almost and weighs the same as me. I'm not a fat ass. That means he's a real thin, skinny ass. He's got to put on some weight. He has got to get stronger because otherwise you're going to have some real concerns about him at the NBA level in terms of being able to absorb the physicality of the game and being able to hold up to an 82-game NBA season. With him being that real thin, is he going to be susceptible to foot injuries? Is he going to have problems with his knees? Is he always going to get dinged up here and there? It's a legitimate concern. You also see that lack of strength and bulk and size really come into play in terms of his post-up game. He has some ability there that he's demonstrated at times at Duke in terms of his ability to hit the turnaround shot, a little bit of a baby hook. But he's a guy that will have real trouble getting any type of advantageous position in the post and on the block based off of just his lack of bulk and his lack of strength. I have some concerns as well about his upside as a rebounder. He was an adequate rebounder at Duke. I see the upside there. But again, until he gets stronger, until he gets bigger, he's going to get pushed around a lot. And especially for him, he's probably going to be playing the three at the NBA level. Now, how much is he really going to bring to the table as a rebounder? For a guy we talk about, by the way, as good of an outside shooter as he is, he's not a very good free throw shooter. That's disappointing. When you're talking about a star player, especially in this modern NBA where it's a lot about small ball and guys on the wings, it is a perimeter-based game. Do you want a guy that's a great outside shooter but can't hit free throws for dick? I mean, sure, maybe he'll get better at it. He'll get more opportunities. He'll work on it. And he'll probably end up developing into it. But right now, he's a mid-60s free throw shooter. And that free throw line doesn't get any closer or any farther away at the NBA level. It's not any shorter at the college level. It's 15 feet. So he can't hit him at the college level on the basis that he should consistently enough. What makes us think he's going to automatically do it at the NBA level? He should have been a much better free throw shooter. In terms of getting his own shot off of the dribble, I talked about earlier, he has some dribble drive ability, but in part I think it was based off of length and in facing inferior athletic competition at the college level. At the NBA level, he's going to face guys that are going to be as tall and as long as him, but are going to be much better athletes. I have some concerns about his ability to break people down like that off of the dribble. Furthermore, I have concerns about his ability to be effective as a pull-up jump shooter. A lot of the shots that he got that were quality that went in at Duke were rhythm shots. They were pick and pop type of shots. They were coming off of screen and roll. I really have some concerns about his ability to take one or two dribbles to the right or to the left and then be able to jump straight up and hit the shot. He didn't show me at Duke on a consistent basis that he could rely on that as a weapon in his repertoire, which could make him potentially somewhat predictable to defend against. So I have some concerns about Ingram. I don't have the same type of grievous type of concerns about him that I do in terms of Ben Simmons, because I don't see the same concerns about a guy having an alpha dog type of mentality or not, or having killer instinct or heart. The way Brandon Ingram played to me suggests that he has more of that in abundance, more of that intangible than a Ben Simmons does. In terms of the Kevin Durant comparisons, I get it. Tall, skinny dude with really good outside touch, can be better on the boards than people give him credit for, is a better shot blocker than people give him credit for. A little bit underrated, perhaps even by me, in terms of his ability to create his own shot off of the dribble, and a much better passer than he's given credit for. I get a lot of that. Guys that with their lack of bulk on their frame need to get bigger, need to get stronger. But you could envision where they're that type of guy. I look at Brandon Ingram and I see some of those comparisons. I see some comparisons to Tracy McGrady in terms of being like a 6'9" type of guy that maybe even played out of position at the 2 for some of the peak years of his career, in particular at Houston and somewhat in Orlando as well. Guys that, could break people down on the dribble, especially McGrady, but as their career progressed and went along, um, he started to just rely more and more on the three-point shot and became less of a complete player. I see some of that in Brandon Ingram's game as well. So I don't know if there's a perfect comparison, but I see some Kevin Durant who reminds me some of Tracy McGrady, if I'm being honest. To me, in my opinion, in terms of a comparison between Brandon Ingram and Ben Simmons, I personally don't think there's that much of a comparison. Now, I don't say that just to shit on Ben Simmons. I think the kid could be a good NBA player. I think he could potentially be a very good NBA player. And if he decides that he wants to be a superstar, he wants to play like a superstar and work like a superstar, he very well can be a superstar. I just feel like when I look at Brandon Ingram, his game translates to me better at the NBA level, and I've seen more want to and have to out of his game, out of his play, out of his approach, than I have Ben Simmons. And that's just the truth. Give me the 6'9" guy with a 7-foot-plus wingspan that can knock down the three, as opposed to the 6'10" point forward who can't shoot a damn lick. I'm just saying. He's somewhat, again, Durant-esque, maybe some Tracy McGrady mixed in as well. But I will say again, similar to Ben Simmons, the same thing with Brandon Ingram. I don't get that nearly that same feeling seeing Brandon Ingram at Duke as I did back in 2006, 2007 seeing Kevin Durant at Texas. I can remember arguing with coworkers and friends at the time. They thought I was insane. They were all in the take Greg Oden camp. One of the things I've been the most right about in the past decade when it comes to sports, period, and I can bring people on to prove how wrong they were and how right it was. I said, you got to take Kevin Durant. It's a perimeter-based game. You need guys like him. That's where the game is going in the future. It's going to be more about small ball. It's going to be about those big, long guys that can knock down the three-point shot and create all types of mismatch problems for opposing defenses. That's the way you've got to go. To me, in this case, it's a similar type of debate. Ben Simmons is not going to stretch the floor much, at least at the early stages of his career, where Brandon Ingram can stretch the floor immediately. Especially if you're a team like Philadelphia and you got some of those bigs down there, what better type of guy to help space the floor for them and open up the low post, open up the block, than a guy like Brandon Ingram. Unfortunately, he's probably not going to go number 1 overall. So the Lakers, if he's sitting there at number 2, they have to be ecstatic about that. If I was a team trying to move up into the top 2 of this draft, I'd be wanting to move up for Brandon Ingram more so than Ben Simmons. Unless maybe I was a team like Boston, then I might want to move up to where Philly is at number 1 and get a guy like Ben Simmons. But other than that, to me, Brandon Ingram is a superior talent to Ben Simmons. With that said, though, I don't know that I view Brandon Ingram to be the number 1 talent in this draft class. I think he's a top 2 or 3 talent, but number 1 overall player, I don't know if I can sign off on that. When I watch him, and sometimes I think when it comes to the NBA, it could be a subjective thing. Because a lot of these things we talk about that they have strengths or weaknesses, those strengths could disappear when it comes to the NBA level. They might not translate. Sometimes those weaknesses can be correctable things. They can be worked on, especially when we're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. 3, 4 years down the road, they could have worked through most of those weaknesses and become superstars. Superstars. I mean, you look at Klay Thompson coming out of Washington State. People thought he was going to be a role-playing guy off the bench. And now he's a starting 2 guard on the defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors. He's an all-star. He's one of the big names in the game today. Sometimes you just don't fucking know, and that's the truth. So in terms of this draft, if I'm picking number 1 and I'm the Philadelphia 76ers, I want Brandon Ingram. If I'm the Lakers at number 2, I'm ecstatic if Brandon Ingram is there. I think he's a tremendous fit for them. But I don't know that Brandon Ingram is the number 1 talent in this draft class, for what it's worth.